Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Affordability and climate change seem to be at odds in the federal carbon tax debate, and that debate has landed in BC. Would a break on the provincial carbon tax help your costs? Would it detract from BC's climate goals? And you may have seen this on TikTok and Instagram, a video dug up from the 1950s featuring a Vancouver dietitian explaining a then unknown food item called pizza. The video has been making the rounds. It is internet famous. What does that dietitian think? She'll be our guest after 12:30. Welcome to BC Today. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thank you so much for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. First, we'll bring you some of the scenes and sounds from Saturday's Remembrance Day ceremonies. It was, of course, a day to reflect and honor those who fought for our freedoms. This year, a particularly powerful Remembrance Day with war on the forefront overseas. CBC's Saurabh Sandhu was at Vancouver's Victory Square and spoke to people among the thousands at the day's ceremony.
Veterans marched proudly through the streets of downtown Vancouver as hundreds lined up on the streets cheered them on. 100-year-old veteran Percival Smith came to honor the memory of his fallen comrades one more time.
It's about the thousands of servicemen and women who didn't come back.
Veterans from the Chinese Canadian community who volunteered to fight in the Second World War were acknowledged.
About 150 British Columbians of Chinese Canadian origin served in Force 136. And additionally, about 700 to 800 served in the Royal Canadian Navy, the Canadian Army, and the Royal Canadian Air Force.
And as veterans reflected on Canada's past, there is also concern about ongoing armed conflicts in other parts of the world.
We now face with continued Russian aggression in Ukraine and the tragedy unfolding between Palestine and Israel.
More than anything else, I think it's the amount of civilians who just died for no reason at all.
Smith says his compatriots fought for a better world, often facing hardships and surviving in substandard conditions. But the recent increase in violence brings back those painful memories of the past.
There have been disruptions in every part of the world. And right now we have places in Gaza and Israel, the Middle East, the Far East, nothing has changed.
Some attendees came to honor loved ones they lost to the war.
Like Remembrance Day, when I even live in Europe, that's very important because my grandpa was in the Second World War and I always remember.
We always come over here on this day because we always want to remember our father, that they fought on the war for
a better future.
While young Canadians found inspiration from the ceremony.
It fills me with a lot of hope and joy for our generation that we are continuing the tradition.
Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
Thanks to the CBC's Saurabh Sandhu for that story. And for the latest now on one of those conflicts mentioned, the Israel-Hamas war today, medical officials and UN agencies are warning that the Al-Shifa facility is no longer a functioning hospital because of shelling and a lack of fuel. It is Gaza's largest hospital.
Sadly, the health system in Gaza is collapsing. Al-Shifa is an iconic hospital in Gaza. It is always the hospital that continues to function across the wars. For the last 3 days, Al-Shifa has not received water and electricity and has stopped operating.
Now, the biggest concern is for dozens of newborns in Al-Shifa's neonatal unit. Israel's troops now have the facility surrounded, determined to destroy what Israeli and U.S. intelligence say is a Hamas headquarters below. Hamas and doctors at the hospital have denied that claim. We'll continue to follow that story for you throughout the day here on CBC. It is 12:10 now, 1:10 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, live streaming as well on CBC GEM and cbc.ca/BC. On YouTube, you can find us at CBC Vancouver. By the way, the latest on that when it comes to Canadians who are escaping the war, the largest group now is out of Gaza. Global Affairs says Canada says 232 Canadians, permanent residents, and their families are now in Cairo. They're getting ready to make their journey back to Canada. 12:11 now. And for a story and debate, an issue being covered here at home, the debate over the federal carbon tax has landed in BC. This morning, Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre spoke in Vancouver behind a podium with the sign, Axe the Tax. He was promoting a bill that would exempt propane used by farmers for heat. Now, that carbon tax debate was reignited last month when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his government would exempt oil used for home heating from the carbon tax for 3 years. That exemption would help Atlantic Canada in particular because more people there still use furnace oil to heat their homes. But the break wouldn't apply to BC. As you know, this province has its own carbon tax system. And so far, Premier David Eby is not talking about changing that provincial system or cutting the provincial carbon tax. He is focusing on another part of that Ottawa announcement, though. That is increased grants for Atlantic Canadians to make the switch to heat pumps. And other provinces, some of them are calling for the carbon tax exemption to apply to all home heating fuels. David Eby is calling for the heat pump grants to apply to BC, but he stands by keeping the BC carbon tax. Here's what he told CBC's Stephen Quinn on the early edition.
I think it's important to draw a distinction here, Stephen, between where BC is and other provinces across Canada. It's proud on behalf of our province to stand up and say, look, British Columbians have seen huge impacts from climate change, from forest fires to floods and rivers drying up in the drought we have this season. And so we're leading the way on action on climate change, which includes a carbon tax. We have seen positive impacts from a carbon tax in terms of reducing pollution. And we believe in protecting people from cost increases, but not protecting high polluting heat sources. And so it's a different path than other premiers, and it requires, though, that the federal government recognize that. And when they enter into a partnership, for example, around heating oil to give out free heat pumps in Atlantic Canada, that really they should also be looking to British Columbia if we're going to lead on climate change, if we're believers that the carbon tax can be effective if we support people as we do with climate action tax credits, then they need to be partnering with us first.
That's Premier David Eby speaking on the early edition last week. So the Premier says no cuts to the BC carbon tax. That is, though, what the opposition party, BC United, is promising to do if it's elected. Cut the carbon tax on all fuels if elected. We're asking you, would carbon tax relief help with your costs? Would cutting the carbon tax detract from BC's climate goals? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Email is bctoday@cbc.ca. In a few minutes, we'll hear from a political scientist who focuses on climate policy. Right now, we're joined by Dan Davies. He's the BC United MLA for Peace River North and the party's rural and social development critic. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
The carbon tax in BC was introduced in 2008 by the BC Liberals under then Premier Gordon Campbell. So why is the BC United, formerly the BC Liberals, now calling for a cut to that carbon tax on home heating fuels?
Well, we need to look at, obviously, there's been a significant time since that was brought in, but we need to look at what it was and what it is now. Of course, when Gordon Campbell brought it in, it was $10 a ton. It was revenue neutral, meaning all those collected funds were given right back into lower income taxes. They were given back into innovation to companies to help innovate. Of course, now, under the NDP government and David Eby, 2018, I think it became not revenue neutral. So it is now basically a tax grab. It's $65 a ton right now. And of course, expected to rise up to $175 a ton. And, we're looking at a lot of the program that you've been talking about right now is affordability. People are broke. 50% of people are $200 away from insolvency, not being able to pay their bills every month. And, we've seen the cost of fuel is probably the biggest factor on that, and the cost of groceries. So we are looking at what are better ways that we can do to, first of all, work within the affordability issues that we're having, as well as new and innovative ways to, of course, look at climate change.
And when you talk about the carbon tax not being revenue neutral, has the BC government not expanded eligibility for the carbon tax, increased the climate rebates, climate tax rebates, in order to ensure more British Columbians can take advantage and will receive more in return? I'm just wondering, is the carbon tax as financially onerous on households as you make it sound?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a couple of things. They're collecting a heck of a lot more than they're distributing, first of all. But secondly, let's look at, I'm here in Fort St. John right now. We've actually in the middle of a bit of a snowstorm as we speak. We've already had minus 20-degree weather up here. We're sitting, I think, at minus 10 right now. We're 5 or 6 months in winter, and a lot of what we're looking at, and of course the federal Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre had mentioned about axing the tax. We're looking at the announcement under Trudeau about what is equal, and in Atlantic Canada they're talking about removing the carbon tax on home heating oil. Mm-hmm. What we've been calling for, and Kevin Falcon of the BC United been calling for, is we should be doing the same. I have no choice up here in Fort St. John other than to heat my home with natural gas. And, I've got my bill here looking at it, and I'm anywhere from $70 upwards of $100 every billing of and just carbon tax alone.
Do you not have a choice to switch to heat pumps?
The heat pumps don't work when it's 35, 40 below. I will still need to augment, for 4 months of the year with either a forced air heat or electricity.
Sure, but wouldn't that make a difference?
No, it would not. If you look at it, if it bumps you into the next tier on your hydro, you're going to be paying significant amount of, hydro costs. And then the cost of the heat pumps, they're still not free. They are still not free. There's still a significant amount of work or a significant amount of income that you need to contribute to a heat pump. And going back to the conversation, right now, people, and this is across British Columbia, no different than up here in the north, when you're deciding, all right, is it between medication this month? Is it between buying groceries? What am I going to be cutting this month? I'll tell you right now, it's not heat pumps, and that additional cost is not in people's minds. It's trying to just get through the month.
What would the BC United Party do about those personal income tax cuts and the low-income climate action tax credit if you do cut the carbon tax for home heating?
Well, a lot of people have also said, what are we going to, where are we going to make up that difference? Because obviously, and first of all, I think it's important to note as well, we're opposition right now to BC United. You cannot make a promise that we're going to cut the carbon tax. And I know a lot of people say that. But, if Pierre Poilievre, in the next government, I guess, more specifically, does indeed cut the carbon tax, well, there's no way that British Columbia could be left at that disadvantage with every other province without one. So we need to be looking at, first of all, innovative ways to be looking at our climate. Secondly, to make up for that loss, there is a lot of, for lack of better terms, ridiculous spending by this NDP government that can be improved. Better ways to direct the money that's there. Secondly, let's get the economy going. If we just get our economy going, that will more than make up for the shortfall of not having that carbon tax. It's doing things better is what we need to do, doing things smarter. All the money that government collects, it's British Columbians' money. We need to 100% be doing the best things that we can to make sure that those dollars are being spent responsibly. And right now, for the last 7 years, we've just seen it in consecutive deficit budgets. We've seen it now in never-ending deficit budgets for the near future. That is not a smart way for people's money and does not help with the affordability crisis that we're all facing right now.
And can I just go back? Did you say you're not promising to cut the carbon tax for home heating fuels if elected?
Oh, no. We are promising to cut the home because and first of all, David Eby could do that right now. David Eby does not have to wait for the federal government to do that, because
No,
remember,
but
British
it's a
Columbians
provincial,
does that.
right. It's up to him because it is a provincial system.
Absolutely. And we are promising Kevin Falcon, the BC United, if elected, we will remove that carbon tax on home heating, because that is something that we can do immediately, as well as our 15-cent gas tax.
I haven't heard, pardon me, I haven't heard you say what you would do with the tax credits and the tax cuts.
Well, obviously, we're going to have to be looking at still giving back to people. We need to be supporting people. So what does that look like in regards to tax credits? Obviously, we're going to have to be looking at the books to see how we can best manage that. And absolutely, we're going to be continuing to look at how are we going to support British Columbians. So absolutely, and we will be coming up with more announcements, obviously, over this next year on this affordability crisis. And there will be tax credits, obviously, in there.
Okay. And finally, Mr. Davies, you're in Fort St. John. This summer, the Donny Creek wildfire north of Fort St. John became one of the largest wildfires in the last century. Increasing wildfires are a consequence of climate change. Do we not need people to transition away from fossil fuels?
Well, let's be honest. People are transitioning away from fossil fuels. We're doing that right now. But it is what do those reasonable timelines look like? And I think this is where
doesn't the carbon tax help people to do that as a deterrent?
Well, does it deter you from using less? It probably does. But again, I'm going back to the reasonableness of it, right? And how else can we look at innovating industry? How can we look at innovating, electrifying? We're already moving towards electrifying these things. These are all significant things that we can do in regards to improving the environment, as well as giving a break to people that are broke. And I think we just need to do things smarter and have better results. And that's what we're not seeing. And that's what worries me as a British Columbian, also who's in the crunch as well. We need to be doing things better for British Columbians.
Dan Davies, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Have a great day.
You too. Dan Davies is the BC United MLA for Peace River North and the party's rural and social development critic. We're asking you, would carbon tax relief help with your costs? Would cutting the carbon tax detract from BC's climate goals? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And let's hear from Doug, who's calling us from Salmon Arm. What do you think of the costs of the carbon tax, Doug?
So to be fair, I actually don't have an answer for that. But when you were talking about it, I had three interesting points that came to mind.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
So the first one is, I actually think it's good of Mr. Eby to propose this idea of having a rebate or something on a heating system. It's really no different from having a rebate on buying an electric car. So I think that's great. Because we already have our own carbon tax. So that's point number one. Mm-hmm. Point number two is I find it really ironic that the new BC United, which was formerly the BC Liberal, are talking about removing the carbon tax, because under Gordon Campbell, when the BC United were the BC Liberals, they were the ones who actually implemented the carbon tax with a lot of fanfare from across the country and around North America and around the world, and they did it with the help of Mr. Weaver of the Green Party. And I just find it really ironic that this is what they're talking about doing.
Is it a different picture now, as Mr. Davies said? It's been a long time, and it's a different picture when it comes to affordability and the revenue neutral nature of the tax?
Yeah, that probably has something to do with it. And my third point is we're now having a national divide, because the East Coast is being offered this opportunity. But when, under the BC Liberals, when they introduced the carbon tax here in BC, we had a real urban, non-urban divide. I mean, like, you think about it now, right? Mr. Davies talked about it. He's up in Fort St. John, and, heaven forbid we have to run our, the people who don't have SkyTrain, the people who don't have a decent transit system, the people who don't have sea buses, they're the ones who are being punished, because we don't live in a community that has alternative systems to get us from point A to point B. Yeah. And I totally understand that. I mean, I'm in Salmon Arm. We're not a rural community, but we're not a urban community. We're an interurban community. And we have a minimum transit system that for some people it works great, but for others it doesn't work at all, right? And I own a delivery business, and my fuel costs are high, but I'm not complaining about that. That's part of owning a business, right? But for the people who live like where Mr. Davies lives, he has to run his trucks for a ton of hours to keep them running, but he's being punished because of that, right? And so I totally understand where he's coming from. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you live in Victoria, or you live in Kelowna, or you live in Vancouver. We're going to benefit you because you have all these systems in place, right?
Doug?
So good for you for living in these places, right? And so that divide is already there. So. Yeah.
That's a really interesting point, Doug. Thank you so much. I'm glad to hear from you in Salmon Arm. 3 points there from Doug in Salmon Arm. Let's hear now from Catherine Harrison, professor of political science at UBC, and she specializes in climate and environmental politics. Catherine, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
You heard there the MLA, Dan Davies, speaking about affordability really hurting British Columbians. What is the public appetite right now for the provincial carbon tax? Is it perhaps taking a back seat to all these, legitimate affordability concerns?
I mean, definitely there are legitimate affordability concerns, and I think that Mr. Poilievre has really jumped on that with his Axe the Tax campaign, and as a result, people have quite an exaggerated sense of how much the carbon tax is actually contributing to those affordability concerns. So the Bank of Canada governor estimated that the carbon tax accounts for just 0.15% of the increase in cost of living. So it's a pretty small part of it. And in fact, if governments are serious about affordability, there are much more important ways for them to address it than axing the tax, which would also have, a significant impact on British Columbia or Canada's ability to meet our climate goals.
We'll get to the climate goals in a moment, but when you talk about the carbon tax, is it still effective? You heard Mr. Davies say it's no longer revenue neutral. Part of it, a big chunk of it now goes to climate policies, clean energy programs, but the province is not on track for their climate goals. So is it effective?
Absolutely. In fact, how the money gets allocated and the price signal created by the carbon tax are quite separate things. It's the price signal that creates the effectiveness, and the price signal is higher than it used to be. In fact, because British Columbia was one province among 10 that had a carbon tax, but we had similar economic and emissions data across the country, economists had a heyday analyzing the environmental impacts of BC's carbon tax. And there, by my count, 15 to 20 peer-reviewed studies that find that BC's carbon tax works, that it's progressive, and that did not harm the economy.
Okay. And so, when you talk about the price signal, are we seeing enough people making that switch? If it's supposed to act as an incentive, are we seeing enough people make that switch? And if not, what is needed then to ensure that we turn away from fossil fuels?
I mean, not enough. We are not where we need to be. And in fact, the carbon tax is scheduled to increase, and the rebates also scheduled to increase accordingly. And that's because one of the things those studies found is that putting a price on pollution did help drive down emissions, but to achieve the cuts that we are looking for, 40% by 2030, and to get to net zero by 2050, we are going to do more. And one of the easiest and most cost-effective ways to do that is to electrify home heating. A study just came out this fall from the Canadian Climate Institute found that in all but the far north of Canada, electric heat pumps are already cheaper than a gas furnace. The problem is that upfront capital cost.
Is it as effective? Will it heat your home or cool your home as well? Which is the argument we heard as well.
Well, it heats and cools. It's very effective in all but the very northmost climate regions, including in British Columbia. And there, we need to electrify and provide, cost of living support for those whose costs would go up by more than others. The solution isn't going to be to burn more fossil fuels, because the source of a big source of the affordability crisis we're facing is global changes in the price of fossil fuels as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's not because of the carbon tax. And in fact, moving away from fossil fuels makes us less vulnerable to those, global swings in prices, and also helps us protect ourselves and our children from extreme climate impacts.
So what then is the solution right now, given cost of living is such an overriding and overwhelming concern for so many British Columbians and Canadians, and they're looking at anything really, and in this case, it would be the carbon tax. They would welcome any kind of relief. So what would the solution be?
Well, I think if the concern is fuel poverty, that people can't afford to pay their bills, provide those who can't afford to pay their bills financial assistance. That I think the program that the federal government has initiated to pay fully for middle and low income households to transition from fuel oil to heat pumps, starting in Atlantic Canada, really should be extended nationwide, because although those heat pumps pay off over the course of their lifetime, it's hard for those who don't have cash or a line of credit to pay up front. So that kind of measure can also help. But reducing the carbon tax doesn't do much for for cost of living, and it undermines our climate goals. We're counting on the carbon tax on home heating fuels for about 8% of the reductions that we need by 2030. And it's not like there's a bunch of easy and progressive measures just sitting in the drawer that governments can pull out. We need to do it all from now on.
Catherine Harrison, thank you so much for your time as well. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
You take care. Catherine Harrison is professor of political science at UBC, specializing in climate and environmental politics. Karen called in Victoria to say the BC United will talk about a certain amount of money, but government works the same way. If we don't collect taxes, we can't pay for services. We need a carbon tax to support climate change initiatives. And Jocelyn writes, no one's mentioned that heat pumps are great for cooling in the summer. It's a big investment, but so worth it now that we are getting such hot weather in the summer. We got ours right before the heat dome. Thank you for your emails. It's bctoday@cbc.ca. It is 12:33 now, 1:33 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. Very nice to have you with us this Monday afternoon. And coming up, we're going to have a really interesting story for you about the way a Vancouver dietitian talked about pizza way back in the 1950s when it wasn't very well known. And that video has now resurfaced and is creating waves online. It's a story that's hard to top. We'll have more after the CBC News Update with Michelle Morton.
Good afternoon. Here are the headlines from the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Demonstrators gathered across the province yesterday in a show of support for Palestinians as the war between Israel and Hamas continues. They're calling for a ceasefire as the death toll in Gaza continues to rise. They're also calling for an end to Israel's blockade of humanitarian aid into the territory. There were dozens of similar protests across the country and hundreds more around the world. A 29-year-old Squamish man has been killed in an avalanche on Saturday near the BC-Alberta border. Two ice climbers had just finished the Lone Ranger route in Peter Lougheed Provincial Park west of Calgary. The 26-year-old woman managed to dig herself out and call for help. Rescuers found her, but no sign of the man she was with. Yesterday, his body was recovered from under the snow. And as we head into the winter, gas prices are expected to continue to fall. Today, gas is sitting at an average of $1.76 per litre in Vancouver, down by about 20 cents a year ago this time. Patrick Dahan is the lead petroleum analyst at Gas Buddy and says it's due to multiple factors, such as the global price for oil, which has dropped for 3 weeks in a row, and stations have switched over to cheaper winter gasoline. DeHaan says prices could drop another 10 to 20 cents by the end of the year. In the local forecast, it's expected to clear this afternoon and windy, highs of 10, and this evening a few clouds with a low of 1. Now back to BC Today with Michelle Eliot.
And as we heard from MLA Dan Davies in Fort St. John, snow just falling on his window there.
Oh.
Yeah. So
winter is coming.
Winter is coming. It's here for so many of us.
Oh, gosh. I don't know if I'm ready for it, Michelle.
Yes, you're going to have to be. I see you're wearing a nice warm sweater there yourself.
Yes.
It is sweater weather, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And we were twinning last week.
Yes, because I have pulled out the sweaters as well. I just have a blazer today, but no, it's nice to be cozy
I know.
inside for today. Nice to see you, Michelle.
Yeah, nice to see you too, Michelle.
Michelle Morton in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC. We're on Radio 1, of course, 88.1 FM in Metro Vancouver, live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Well, we're going to take a step back in time to 1957. It was a time when there were few restaurants and most of the cooking and entertaining was done at home. It was also a time when pizza was considered an exotic food. It wasn't well known in Canada. And so imagine you've been asked to join other homemakers at the time to film a TV pilot right here at CBC Vancouver. The TV pilot doesn't get turned into a TV show, so you forget about it, you'll go on with your life until you find out in 2023 that you have become internet famous. That video has been making waves online, that very video about you talking about pizza. Well, that's exactly what's happened to our next guest, Kathy Brady, whose video has caught fire on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and X over the past couple of weeks. Now, she was a UBC grad at the time. She was trained as a dietitian in their home economics program, a young wife and mother, and she joins me now here in our studio. Oh my goodness, it's so nice to have you here, Kathy. May I call you Kathy?
Yes, please do.
And with you, you've brought your daughter-in-law, Debbie Butt. Debbie, you found this Instagram post.
Yeah, it was.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was just crazy how it popped up on my algorithm.
Okay, so tell me about that moment when you saw it and you realized that here was Kathy.
You know, it was like it's a historical page that's a Canadian historical page, and that's I search for I follow a lot of Canadian historical pieces and also cooking show, cooking things on Instagram. So it popped up and I was like, oh my gosh, that's my mother-in-law. And I made a post right away. I said, that's my mother-in-law.
Oh
She's still an amazing cook. She's like and then I started to get a whole bunch of queries from the people who were looking at it and asking questions, where's she from? What's her accent? So it was super fun. And I couldn't wait to, Grandma comes over every Sunday night for dinner, so I couldn't wait to tell her about it.
And what was that like at the dinner table, Kathy, when you found out, when Debbie told you this?
Well, I was quite surprised. Needless to say,
Yes.
That's more than 70 years ago. So it's a total surprise to me.
And how did you feel?
Oh, well, I was quite honored to have that. All my friends were very anxious to hear about it and watch the television and so on. But
can you take us back to that day? What made you want to get involved? What was it like to film that video and why focus on pizza?
Well, in our home ec course, my fourth year, there's a demonstration or it's a course in demonstration. So we had to prepare. And it's quite involved because you have to learn to work with your hands and also talk and make it interesting. So the CBC, I guess, phoned and wanted to take a picture of one of our demonstrations. And it all came about like that.
Okay, and so then you came to CBC Vancouver.
Yes.
And then what happened?
Well, then they had the film done.
Yeah.
And it was my idea to do the pizza because they said, well, choose which you like to do.
Yes.
And so I sort of thought, well, it's sort of unique because it was just starting to come into form. And we didn't really have much here in Canada. It was mostly in the States.
Yes. And how did you feel about, I'm going to talk about this kind of novel food item right now for people?
Well, I don't know.
Exciting?
Yes, yes, it is exciting.
Well, you know, I've seen the video, and we have some clips of it right now, and we'll get some of your reaction to just what it looks like. Let's take a look at part of the video right now.
Good afternoon. I'm Mrs. Brady. Today I'm going to make that popular Italian dish, pizza pie. You've all probably heard about it, and if you like the recipe, please get a pencil and paper, and then you can take it down as I go. Pizza pie is becoming very popular, especially down in the States. There are some restaurants that even specialize in it. These are called pizzerias. And Saturday night, as you drive down, you can see cars lined up for miles waiting for their pizza. Pizza pie is composed of 3 parts. First, there is the base, which is usually a biscuit or a yeast dough. This is covered with a tangy tomato sauce, sprinkled with oregano, and then topped with nippy cheese.
That is a video from the 1950s of our guest, Kathy Brady, demonstrating pizza here at CBC Vancouver. How do you feel watching that video back, Kathy?
Well, I think it's quite funny.
Yeah, why?
I don't know. It seems to me that I have a bit of an accent, but I don't really have an accent. I don't know how that got into it.
Yeah, you watched a few films, maybe.
I don't know.
Oh, well, we have another clip here, and let's play it as well.
Now, if you're having somebody drop in and you want a quick party snack and tasty treat, here's a little trick. Just take a hamburger bun and slice it in half, and this will be your base for your pizza pie. I'll just move this over here. Now, this is a grand idea, especially if you've got one of those large, lazy Susans. You can just put old pickles and relishes in the center, and then you can put these individual pizzas around the edge. Serve this with lots of good black coffee, and you'll be a popular hostess. Now, these are baked at the same temperature as our main pizza, 400 degrees, or else you can broil them if you don't want to put the oven on. Now, I do hope that you'll try making pizza pie for your family or your guests soon, and I do hope that you find them satisfactory. And I know it's such a simple thing to do, and also you can use your imagination on the toppings to produce a different and a taste treat for the family. And I'm sure you'll all become real pizza fans soon.
Way to bring it home at the end. I know that people who are watching our live stream were able to watch the video and see some lovely photos right now of Kathy Brady as well. But if you are listening on radio, I'll describe it for you. Why don't I let you describe it for us, what you look like and what you were doing there in that video, Kathy?
Well, I don't know what I look like. I am 90, so I'm a few years older than those days.
You had short, curly, dark hair.
Yes.
Some big pearl earrings and like a cardigan. And you were demonstrating how to put the pizza together. You had 2 plates, and you were putting the toppings on top, and they cut a close-up into your hands, demonstrating it. And then you had a big smile at the end, saying, I hope you enjoy it.
Right.
Can I ask you, I'm going to go back to the first clip. What is nippy cheese? I am not familiar.
Well, it's just a strong flavored cheese, like a strong cheddar.
Okay. All right. And I have to describe something else that's happening for our audience as well. If you haven't seen it, Debbie and Kathy just looking at each other, smiling as they're watching this video, just sort of with glee. What's going through your mind, Debbie?
Well, I think it's just so great to see my mother-in-law. Like she raised children, and she also looked after my children, right? Yeah. So she's a great grandmother, she's a grandmother, and I love the opportunity to see her shine, and this just watching her relive this and go through a part of her life, like reflecting back and seeing, and she did a lot of things in her life, right? Yeah. And it's just really great to celebrate it while she's here.
Yes, and you were at the forefront of this trend at the time, and you're a practicing dietitian, and you've moved on to be in this space, right? In this industry.
Well, I worked for about 30 years, but on and off. Mm-hmm. And mostly in hospitals.
In hospitals.
Or I had my own private practice in Montreal where I did consulting.
Yeah. Did you ever, I guess I'm wondering, I'll ask both of you, is this a piece of Vancouver history, Canadian history, that more people should be aware of?
Oh, I don't know.
I know. I wasn't going to ask you because I know you're going to be modest about it. I'll let Debbie do the talking on that.
I mean, I think so. I think for me, I've been a working mom my whole life, and to know, and to see my mother-in-law that, that she worked and raised children and found ways. Her husband moved around. She kind of followed wherever he was going, and she managed to continue to work and also raise children and find ways to have, something that was hers, and that she was developing her career in the way that suited her and her family lifestyle. And I think that's really admirable in that time.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to do it now, and it was even harder to do it then. So, yeah.
Oh, then Kathy, do you have any advice then for other people right now, young mothers who are, at home? And
well, it's so different. When we were at home, I was sort of unique in the sense that most of my friends stayed home and raised babies.
Yeah.
And for today, it's not acceptable. And of course, the mortgages are so high that they have to work to bring in two incomes.
Sure, yeah.
So it's difficult.
I'm going to put out the phone numbers because if you have seen this video and you would like to ask a question or make a comment, perhaps it made your day, let you learn a little bit about a piece of Vancouver history, we'd love to hear from you. And if you just want to ask a question, perhaps, of Kathy, you can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email to bctoday@cbc.ca. And if you have your own memories of pizza starting to make waves in Canada, those long lineups outside restaurants that Kathy was talking about in that video, you can reminisce with us too. Just give us a call again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And so, Kathy, have you seen some of the comments on social media?
I saw some on TikTok.
Yes?
Yes.
And what were people saying?
Well, I'm just trying to remember. Some of them were quite funny.
Yeah, I know.
They queried me about my accent, I think one of them was.
and you didn't have an answer.
No.
What did you think of, I mean, you were the one who kind of shepherded this through social media. So what's that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I don't post a lot on or say things and make comments on other people's sites necessarily, my friends group and everything. But so it was really funny to hear, people like, oh, well, where's she from? What's she doing now? Is she still alive? And, does she, where is she from? People said, oh, she's from Newfoundland and she's from here and that's not a Canadian accent. And I said, well, no, she's from Saskatchewan. That is a Canadian accent. And, people made fun of me. There was a time that she was sharing, you can sprinkle oregano, or some people call it oregano. Oh. That's included in the,
Yeah.
And then the pizzerias, it's a family joke now. So she comes over and they're, oh, Grandma, let's go to a pizzeria.
What do you think of that? Just the kind of kerfuffle that you're making online.
Oh, well, I'm very indebted to my daughter-in-law. Yeah. She is amazing. She works for the Canucks for Kids and does a wonderful job. Wow. And I'm so proud of her.
You're just throwing it right back, aren't you? All the praise. It's mutual admiration society here. Yeah. We have some of the questions that were put to you online, and so we'd like to put them to you now. These are some good questions for you. We did ask, where does your accent come from? But you were born in Vancouver. But tell us more about how popular pizza was. How did you gain wind of it?
Well, I think it was just sort of coming to fore when I was going to university. People were talking about it and going to make it at home because you couldn't buy it in a store or a restaurant. And so I just thought it was quite unique. And it would be an interesting topic. Anyways, it's for the future.
Right. Well, it has become that for sure.
It certainly has become that, yes.
And so, Debbie was saying people want to know what you're up to now. What are you up to now?
Oh, well, I live in a very, very nice retirement institution called Tapestry. And they have a wonderful program of activities, which I am participating in a lot. Mm-hmm. And I golf 3 times a week if I can, weather permitting. And then I walk every day. And then I have my grandchildren, which are very rewarding for me.
I bet they keep you busy.
They do. I wish that they were all here, but they aren't.
And I understand there was a viewing of the video at your retirement home? Or there will be?
I think there will be.
Yeah. This is the plan.
Yeah.
They're coming on as well. What do you think the reaction will be from your friends there?
Oh, I think they'll be quite surprised.
They'll be tickled, I'm sure. I'll put out the phone numbers once again and just ask people to call in if you have a question or a comment about the video you've just seen or heard, and let us know if you have seen it online and we're tickled by the novelty of it as well. We'd love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca. And we actually have a special treat because we're going to have a little bit of a walkthrough with an updated recipe now. With an updated recipe because, of course, oh my goodness, things have changed, haven't they? From the days of the pizzeria, is that right?
Pizzeria.
And we are going to get a demonstration of pesto pizza, which is one of my favorites. And so Kathy and Debbie are going to demonstrate that for us. And let's get set up now. Okay. And our colleague Melody is here to help. We're going to pull out some of the ingredients here. Do you make pizza at home, Debbie? I mean, Kathy, pardon me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so what kind of pizza? Oh, my goodness. Let's just be distracted now by that lovely pizza you just put on. But what is your favorite pizza to make at home, Kathy?
I think I like the... I think I like the pepperoni.
Pepperoni, my daughter's favorite, but you have much more than pepperoni on this one, don't you? Let's perhaps get a...
See, it's very nutritious. You know, that's my main theory is that you have to be nutritious.
Okay.
And eat healthily. And then you live a long life. And so it's very important that you follow the Canada food rules.
So you obviously worked as a dietitian at a hospital. Tell us more about that, how you felt about that work and what about it was fulfilling for you?
Well, I was an outpatient dietitian, so I would get referrals from the doctors in the hospital and other doctors. And it was a varied type of work because there was everybody. I started with young children and adults and the airline pilots and quite a variety of people.
Airline pilots, were there concerns around their diets?
Well, because they needed to have good nutrition for their eyesight.
Oh.
And they needed, a lot of them had a weight problem. So that was in the business of consulting.
Something that you focus on.
In the outpatient department, yes.
What do you make now of there's so many fad diets out there and a lot of, the sort of wellness culture. What should people really think about when you talk about eating nutritiously?
I think it's amazing what's happened because prior to the last 10 years, people ate a lot of junk food and have a terrible weight problem. And what's most disconcerting are the young people today because they have not an active lifestyle like we did as kids, and they're gaining a lot of weight, and I'm afraid they're going to be a large group of diabetics coming up because of this weight gain and inactivity.
And when it comes to weight, people obviously have different weights regardless of what they eat. Is it more about eating healthy, but focusing on eating healthy?
It is nothing like just eating 3 balanced meals a day. Boring, but 3 balanced days with carbohydrate, proteins, and fats involved in the balance of it. And if they can, exercise is really, really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have found a way to make pizza nutritious.
I hope so.
Let's take a look. Our studio here looks just beautiful. We have the pizza dough, the flatbread, and we have some Parmesan cheese, bell peppers. I think I see some prosciutto over there. Yeah. Oh, did I say nutritious? And is that arugula over there? Why don't you, Debbie and Kathy, why don't you go ahead and explain and perhaps demonstrate for us what you've got?
Okay. Well, here's the flatbread, which is you purchase in any food store. You can make your own with biscuit dough, but it's easier this way.
Sure.
Yeah. And then, of course,
We're going to spread some.
Yeah. And this is just a regular tomato sauce.
Okay. See, there it is, tomato. We're going to have a debate over that now. This actually comes at a really opportune time for me because I was just about to plan to make a pizza for my kids' lunches this week.
Perfect.
So here we are. I'm going to get some great ideas. And you have some, is that feta cheese?
This is goat cheese.
That's goat cheese.
Yes, I'm very fond of goat cheese, but I do like feta.
Yeah.
And, of course, Parmesan is what the most people use on. But any cheese you like is fine.
Okay.
And some people, actually, one of the questions was how many calories are in a pizza. But you can cut the calories down if you use a low-fat cheese.
Right.
And there are low-fat cheeses available in your food store, so just ask for it.
Where does goat cheese fall on that spectrum? I'm guessing pretty high.
Okay. And now we'll just put.
It is one of my favorite. It is quite decadent, I have to say. It's a treat when I get to have some goat cheese. And we have some emails here as well as Kathy and Debbie make the pizza that we're demonstrating, because we are, of course, looking back to that pizza video that was in 1957 made by Kathy right here at CBC Vancouver. And this was a time when they were piloting a new show, and Kathy Brady, a young student at UBC, a training dietitian, was here to demonstrate how to make pizza, which at the time was a novelty. Karen writes as on BC Today at cbc.ca, I related to this conversation. My very first experience of pizza following my high school graduation in 1957 was on Orcas Island in Washington. It was my first year of university in Seattle, and it was such an attractive and novel food to discover. Exactly like you were saying, Kathy. Aja writes, I have some very untasty spelt buns in my freezer. Your guest gave me a great idea to make those pizza pop things. There you go.
That's good.
I made a delicious Pasilla tomato sauce and will slather it on each half of the bun with a sprinkle of my homemade oregano. And your guest, Kathy, is adorable. I hope I'm still making pizza pop things when I am 90. Thank you so much. Let's get, your pizza looks absolutely delicious. Thank you so much, Debbie and Kathy, for joining us. I think it's lunchtime. Congratulations on this. Really loved to have you. I know people are very excited about this story. So great to meet you both.
Thank you very much, man.
Thanks, Michelle. Take care.
It's Kathy Brady, a retired dietitian, wife and grandmother living here in Vancouver. Debbie Butt is her daughter-in-law. That's it for our show today. Go have some healthy pizza. I'm Michelle Eliot. Have a great afternoon.